Hi, everyone. It's Christina Herrick, produce editor of The Packer and host of Tip of the Iceberg. And I'm here with another episode. Greg Gatzke, CEO of Zag Technical Services, is joining me to talk about cybersecurity. Thank you so much for joining me, Greg.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so part of the reason that I reached out and we wanted to have this conversation is Zeg just released this, I don't want to say warning, I don't want to sound alarmist, but released a statement just kind of talking about some of the vulnerabilities within the ag industry with cybersecurity. So I kind of wanted to back up the conversation. I know, our listeners and viewers probably have a lot of different technical capabilities. So, I kind of wanted to get to the bare bones. What is cybersecurity and why is it important? And then we can kind of roll into its relationship to the ag industry.
For sure. So cybersecurity is the way that we protect the investments that we've made in the infrastructure that helps support our businesses. Um, ag requires technology more and more every day. You think about all the problems we have, water,
Yeah,
labor, et cetera. They're all pretty much answered or can be helped through technology.
true.
As we build this technology to reduce the amount of labor required to manufacture produce and put food in a bag, it as we do that, we become more dependent upon it. And without that cybersecurity, we're putting the business at risk. So as businesses become more dependent upon this technology, ensuring that the technology is functioning and delivering, it becomes more and more critical that the security be put in place.
Yeah, and I think as you were talking, what I was thinking about too is just now with the Food Safety Modernization Act and a lot of traceability, there's a lot. I feel like the ag industry has a lot more data, and obviously like the smart sensor sprayers, add anything that's got the word smart on it, and it just in my mind means more data. That then means more vulnerabilities. So let's talk about some of that. You kind of alluded to that there's some vulnerabilities within the ag industry, and especially in the release, I believe it worded that like that the ag industry was kind of one of the most threatened, most vulnerable. Like, I just don't want to keep using the word vulnerable, but the most vulnerable, just given its position and given just how many points of data and entry there are. So, talk a little bit more about that. I'd love for you to expand a little bit more on just the ag industry and its vulnerabilities, and then we can kind of go into some of the what our viewers need to know.
Sure. So as I mentioned, ag relies on technology,
Yeah,
and you talk about government regulations. Government regulations are increasing; they're not decreasing, right?
yeah,
And to answer those regulations, in many times can be solved by technology. We can trace the product using
yeah,
technology, et cetera. So HR regulations, kind of all that. And so as we do that, we're in an industry that is we're cost driven. So they care about pricing. How many times has retail come to us and said we want to raise our prices willingly, right? They don't do that. So they drive us down on cost. We continue to become more dependent upon technology, which requires that we secure that. And those two things in combination do not lead to a good outcome. And that's why we need to take a step back, understand the investment we're making in technology, understand that it's key to business.
yeah.
You can no longer say we can go back to paper. You can't go to paper, create a post-it note that Target will accept, right? As a label. They won't, right? So we need to lean into the technology, protect it in order to protect the businesses.
Yeah, and one thing I thought about as I was kind of reading the notification from SAG is just, how does a business, how does a and I'm thinking of even the grower side, a packing warehouse, things that have a lot of data and shared data and move data might be able to understand this risk a little bit more. But I was thinking, like, how does a grower even know if they're vulnerable for cybersecurity threats, or is it just how do you know, or just should you assume that everybody is going to be under the risk of a cybersecurity threat and we should act accordingly? And then, like, what do you do from there?
So perfect question. Everybody is vulnerable. The NSA has been hacked, right? And so
Yeah.
people with a lot more
True.
money have been hacked. So the
True.
answer or the question to me, the first question is, if you are hacked, can you recover and recover without paying? Because in most cases, or in many instances, paying does not, they're not able to deliver recovery upon paying. So you need to be able to recover on your own. So you need someone, I believe, as a third party to come in and validate that ability. Then the other is you need to understand the dependence upon technology. So, for instance, if you're in retail and you're getting orders which are 1,000 lines, and and just the flood of data coming in, that replaces so much manual effort that you cannot scale to without.
Yeah.
So, understand what your business risk is, and then from there, it's a matter of security is like insurance. You can never have enough insurance, except it becomes expensive. So therefore, figure out the right place to insure yourself on cybersecurity, not with insurance, which is also important, but insure yourself in that you've got the right security in place. And so what we do is we'll come in and we understand ag, we understand the world that that you operate in, and that enables us to say we'd recommend something here or here, and kind of level it up and kind of give you a better view into what you will survive and what the risks are. Most organizations, they know what will happen if power goes out. They know how to
True.
operate without that. Do they know what will happen if a cybersecurity event happens? And they need to, because that is happening more often than a fire in the building, right? It's happening pretty
Yeah.
consistently.
So when you were saying recover, and I've done a couple cybersecurity stories. I'm by no means an expert, but I do think I'm starting to understand some of the complexities and nuances. But when you said recover, and you kind of talked about recover without paying, and can you kind of what does that mean? What happens? Why would you have to pay? I think some of our listeners and viewers probably are well aware of this and understand, and they're probably shouting at the computer screen right now at me asking such a silly question. But I do think that it's worth mentioning. So what does that mean? What is recovery?
So let me say first off, it's not a silly question, because until you've been through it, you don't understand it, right?
Interesting.
And having lived it, it's a different world once you've gone through the problem. So effectively, what happens in a cybersecurity breach is the criminals come in, and the first thing they do is they look for what's called personal identifiable information, PII. They take that PII and export it out, and then hold that hostage. Um, Organizations tend to have PII. It tends to be in HR's home directories, stuff like
Yeah.
that. It's just working documents that they store there and probably forget about. So executives should drive into their team and validate that there isn't that risk, that you're not sitting with social security numbers on a spreadsheet somewhere. Then after that, what the criminals do is they'll encrypt everything, meaning all the computers become unusable, and they'll say, you give us millions of dollars and we'll give you the key to unencrypt them and make them usable again. So what we recommend is you have a plan and the ability to recover that without having to pay. And there are very certain things, because the criminals get better and better about it. They delete backups. They do all these things that they used to not do, right? They're evolving. Well, we have to evolve.
Yeah.
And so by doing that, and knowing that you can recover, then you know what your standard is. But also understand how long it's going to take you to recover, right? Our goal generically is 24 hours, which seems like a really long time to an IT person. But when you include cybersecurity, you've got to do things like ensure that the criminals aren't there. How did they get in? Are you at risk again? It's not like there's a fire in the building and it's put out, right? You're fighting another person on the other side. So so understanding how long it will take you to recover is critical, because if you can't recover in a certain period of time and you can't produce, it will impact your customers, and your customers may go elsewhere for their product.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking more in the packing scenario where, you've lost all your ability to understand what orders go to what retailer. And you've got products that obviously in the fresh produce industry, it's a big deal because you've got produce that has maybe a short window of time to be delivered when it's actually in good quality. And then all of a sudden you've lost everything and you're at a grinding halt. And I do, like I said, I've written a couple stories, so I understand that there are different ways that these cybersecurity criminals find ways to get into systems. It might be as innocuous as possible. It's not, just an email from a CEO asking you to send them a gift certificate to a certain company at this time or what, there's some obvious ones that you go, well, why would this person be doing this? But, there's a lot of nuances. So anyway, I think that's really interesting and kind of you talking about the difference between, ransomware and paying and not, and how you prevent that from slowing your operation down. So, um, talking about data and keeping data safe, and you kind of talked about the recovery side of it. So now I want to go to the other side of it, which is, um, how how do you prevent this? How do you keep data safe? What are some? Do you have some advice for people on just what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing, kind of thinking about that data, and obviously understanding, like we said, the broad spectrum of the produce industry, where you've got different technical experiences and maybe know-how, and kind of working together.
Yes. So to the owners, to the board members, things like that, I would say understand what your risk is, understand what the impact would be of an issue. Um, as I mentioned, PII, personal identifiable information, that's a big thing, right? That is a thing that really IT can't solve, because if the criminals get in, we can try to prevent that. But really, that's for the business to get it off the systems, right? Just don't have it there. That's
Yeah.
a huge savings if they just do that. The recoverability is things that take investment, and that's where organizations like us who've gone through this and understand the ins and the outs of it, that's the value that we add, right? And then, it goes as far as another type of attack, which I'm sure everybody is familiar with, is what we call ACH fraud, which is where they say my bank changed. Don't send the check to my normal bank. I've got a new bank here, and that is a criminal's bank because the vendor's been hacked or something like that.
Yeah.
Be aware of that stuff. Train your people on that. Ensure that that we call a number to confirm in a known good number and not the number in the email, because the criminals evolve and they're
Yeah.
now sending, hey, if you have a question, call me at this number, and they staff that with people to answer. So there are just a lot of processes that are IT that has to happen, where companies like us can go in and ensure they're secure, or at least know the level that they're secure and how they can recover. But there are other things like business things like ACH changes. When's the last time you changed your bank? People don't do it that often.
No.
But yet, if I get a simple email saying I changed a bank, sure, I'll do that. It's just another job. It's not that.
Yeah. So you were talking about, and I didn't ask you this before, and I should have. Is, you talked about ways that the cybersecurity criminals can get into systems, and you kind of identified a couple of them. Um, you know, what are there some other things that our listeners should be paying attention to other than ACH, or just like I said, those emails that you just know are totally off, where the CEO is asking you to send some kind of gift card to somewhere. What are some other places that these cybersecurity criminals can get in, and hackers can get into the business systems?
Yep. So the first thing is understand that they're not necessarily targeting you. Unless you're a multi-billion-dollar company, they may not be targeting you, right? They're just doing a shotgun approach, and they're hitting
Interesting.
everybody. And as they find a weakness, they will do that. So there are things that you can do, like multi-factor authentication on email and remote access. Everyone should have that today. That's where you log into Outlook the first time and you click a thing saying, yes, this is me. Not a text, but it through an app.
Yeah.
Doing that, your kids have that on their Gmail accounts. Why do we not have them on corporate accounts, right? And it's not that everybody pushes against it, or they used to push it against it, Now that is not as prevalent because everybody sees what's happening.
Yeah.
But if you are pushing against it, well, you won't the minute you're hacked, right? So doing things like that, doing best practices, things like your backups need to be not controlled by your normal administrator accounts. Because if the criminals get that administrator account, they can delete all the backups, and that will stop you from being able to recover. There are some very, basic things that everyone should be doing, but then there are more nuanced things that will significantly further reduce your risk. Not
No,
everybody's going to do everything, but the more you do, the better you are and the less at risk you are.
that makes sense, and that's a good point. There are levels to this, but thinking again, thinking about the broad spectrum of type of users, that might be accessing this system. Yeah, you want to make sure that you start kind of entry level, and then depending upon how much access to data a person might have or the ability, then yes, you want to step that up. I was thinking as you were talking, and I don't want to say I hope that our viewers are scared, but I hope they're taking our conversation seriously, because like I said, I've done a couple stories in even different industries, and this is a problem and it's an issue and it's going to continue. The more data we use, the more technology we use, the more complicated that technology is, just the more vulnerable we all are. So, where can a business get started? And then also, it's a two-part question. And then, obviously, we're talking Zag offer services. So how could someone listening know that they're working? Like, what questions should they ask a provider of this type of service to make sure that they're getting a solution that's actually a good solution, and a business, a company, a security company that knows what they're doing and can really help? Like, are there questions that someone should be asking, and where should they get started, I guess, are the two parts.
Yep. So again, I would start with the question, and this could be to your internal IT team, it could be to a third party. How long will it take to recover if there's a breach? The second thing I would ask would be, what is the number one thing you would do to improve our organization? Every company has something that they could do to improve. Too many IT people don't think about those things anymore because they've been told no for so long. Well, it's a new day. IT is critical to organizations,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to engage with them as partners, right, to do that. And then finally, I would say, just understand their depth in history. How many attacks have they gone through? How many times have they helped people recover? Because it's different reading it in a book and doing it. And people that are in the fire doing it have such a better perspective and can give you such better guidance in the process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I do think those are questions to ask, because obviously, um, you want to work, if you're going to go with a third party provider for security, you want someone that has knowledge and has done it, and kind of weathered the storm, because there and maybe I'm generalizing, but I do feel like there's probably some companies out there that offer flashy solutions and maybe haven't actually had experience. And I think I personally, me, or owning an agribusiness company, a phantom agribusiness company, I would want someone that I know would have experience, maybe understand some of the nuances of ag too, but also have some experience in weathering that storm for a company my size, or a company that I hope to grow into. Because I think that's another just element, like, as I alluded to and you mentioned, just there's a lot of import there's a lot of points of entry for data, and just understanding all of that risk, and just understanding a lot of that vulnerability from the get-go is critically important.
Yeah, absolutely. And the ultimate thing I would tell an owner or board member is, a lot of people think, I don't understand IT, therefore it's a black box. I'm not going to deal with it because I don't get it. We can't take that approach anymore.
Yeah.
Companies dependent upon it, just like you know quality, QA aspects, you have to know IT aspects, and you have to educate yourself. And we work to share that knowledge. We work with boards, we work with owners, because it is the one thing that can shut an organization down overnight and we have to be able to protect it.
Absolutely. And, a lot of times, like I said, I've done a few stories where someone may not even realize they're vulnerable or they've been attacked in the initial beginnings, as it starts, and then, it becomes a major problem. And you alluded to the cost too. There's risk with cost involved and time, and yeah, it's important to not take the ostrich approach and bury your head in the sand. You've got to really be proactive. And kind of the other point that I thought was interesting that you mentioned is just, everybody's at risk, because a lot of these hackers are just trying to see where there's vulnerabilities. And, if they're doing these little attacks and they see the potential for something bigger within a company, that's a problem. You don't want that. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. So I know we covered a lot of topics and I kind of jumped around here, but thinking about cybersecurity within the agriculture industry and obviously the fresh produce side, is there something else that I should have asked about that I didn't, or is there anything else you want to leave our viewers or listeners with?
Yeah. So unfortunately, I could go for hours and hours on topic, right? Because there are just so many things.
Yeah.
It is so nuanced, and that's part of the problem. Is it becomes blinding with just it, and so that's part of our value is we can come in and we can give you a no kidding view on ag companies, where they stand compared to the industry. Can they recover? Are there free things that they can do to ensure their security, which often is we find is the case. Just kind of that plethora of things, and that's where I don't want to overwhelm you with, well, check this and that, because we do all that, but ultimately I think the takeaway is understand your dependence upon IT, understand that your company cannot function in the way it does without IT, and then understand, can you recover, and where your risk is at. And if you understand those things, then you can work towards it. Treat it just like you do every other line of business in your business, right? You
Yeah.
manage maintenance on your equipment. Well, manage maintenance on your computer equipment. It's no different, but yet we talk like it's different. We need to break that down. We need to just treat it like part of the business.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I fantastic soundbite there. I think, that really does encapsulate kind of what the conversation I was hoping to have with you today is on. But I'd love to bring you back on the podcast. Like I say to a lot of guests, I think this is another one. Cybersecurity and just kind could be something that there's a lot of avenues we can go down and more conversations to be had. So if you're willing, I'd love to have you back on at some point in the future to continue this conversation and maybe go the next level. This is tip of the iceberg, so we usually only have time to just get to kind of the tip of the conversation that, and then, kind of build on that. So yeah.
Yeah, I would love to. Criminals evolve, so we need to keep the conversation going. And but tip of the iceberg is perfect, because now people know the iceberg is there, and how do we
Yeah.
address it, right? So it's spot on analogy.
Yeah. Well, great. I thank you so much for joining me on the podcast, Greg. This has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. Like I said, I think there's a lot more that we can get into with it, but I think it was, hopefully we didn't scare everyone, but I do think this was a great conversation to start the thought on cybersecurity.
Yeah, and the intent is not to scare. The intent is to make awareness,
Yeah.
because you've got to be aware, because it is scary, but you've got to be aware.
I think that's a good point. Well, I'll
Thank you.
try to make sure that when I do the wording of the write up for this, that we stress more of the awareness, not scare.
Yeah, and I think realistically, everybody knows that companies are being attacked. One good thing
Yeah,
is
that's true.
people are becoming more public about it,
Yeah,
right? So they're not keeping, there's no shame that we used to have. And that is such a healthy thing for the industry.
that's true. That is true. Things have changed with the conversation where, it used to be a big scary thing when you'd hear one company say that they were a part of an attack. And now you hear it all the time, and you hear, people having their data being compromised as well. So yeah. Well, thank you again for joining me. And I also just want to thank the listeners and viewers for tuning in. And if you like what you hear, you can catch new episodes of Tip of the Iceberg on your favorite podcast platform like Google, Spotify, Apple, and more. And that's a wrap for this edition of Tip of the Iceberg, brought to you by the Packer, Produce Market Guide, and Farm Journal. Join us again soon for more industry insights. Bye.